Hashem. Today's parsha study is chapter 23 of Devarim, pasuk chet. Lo tita'ev adomi. Now you're not allowed to. The word tita'ev means to despise here. Not despise an Edomite. Ki achichahu. He's your brother. Which is, who is Edom? Edom comes from Esav. Or Esav comes from Edom. Do not despise an Egyptian, because you are a foreigner in his land. I mean, technically speaking, you weren't a foreigner, you were a slave. So let's see what Rashi says here. Rashi says, do not despise an Edomite with Gamri completely. Meaning to say, you're allowed to despise him a little bit, but you can't totally despise him. Because after the third, we're about to say that you're not allowed to marry an Edomite. So it means you can't completely despise him, because even though he's your enemy, even though you really should despise him, because he went out to greet you with a sword, nevertheless, you're not supposed to completely despise him. You're not allowed to despise an Egyptian, mikol vakol. You can't despise him at all. And Rashi says, Afal pisha darku zichureihem yaor. Even though he threw your males into the river, nevertheless, you're not allowed to despise him at all. Matam, what's the reason? Shayu lachem achsanya b'shas atchak, because they hosted you during the famine. Therefore, you can't completely despise him. So we see from here that even though the Egyptians enslaved us, we have to have gratitude for what they did for us. Even though they enslaved us and killed our firstborn sons, we have to remember with gratitude that the good that they did for us. I'm going to share with you something that I heard this week from Rav Kook. How come we say two questions? How come when we wake up in the morning, the first thing we do is say, Moda ani, I'm grateful to you? How come we don't first do Netilat Yadayim, wash our hands, and then say Moda ani? Every other thing we don't say. We just say Moda ani before Netilat Yadayim. So it says the Rav Kook, because when it comes to gratitude, you can't wait. You do it right away. You have to express our gratitude to Hashem Yisparach. Also, it should say, the Hebrew Mordechai is, I am grateful. So it should be, Ani Modeh. Why is it Modeh Ani? Gratitude am I? It should really be, I am grateful. Follow the question? So the way it's explained is, gratitude can't be something that you do. It has to be you. Your whole essence, our whole essence, has to be an essence of gratitude. That's the idea. So that's why, even though the Egyptians did so many bad things to us, we have to remember with gratitude the good that they did. Says the pasuk, the next pasuk, Banim asher yivaldu lahem, the children that will be born to them, Dor Shlishi Avoam B'Kal Hashem, the third generation can come into the community of Hashem. Rashi says the children that are born to them, only by the third generation, if they convert, if an Egyptian converts, he's only allowed to marry in the third generation. Rashi says, Ushara umot, but all the other nations, mutarim miyad. Hey, Donnie, how you doing? I didn't know you were a basketball player, Tani. Wow, wow. Okay, good. So all here, have a seat. We're chapter 23, verse 9. All the other nations are permitted to marry in immediately. Alamadata, we learn from here, Shamachti Adam, Kashlo Min Hargo. Somebody who causes. How are you doing there, Erez? Is this your grandfather you're bringing with you? What do you call your grandfather? Saba? Sabazagi? Sabaliptek? Do you have a chumash? Okay, you passed one, but if you want another one, are you looking for something specific? Okay. So, Erez, you can read this Rashi. Berachov Gimel Pasuk Tet. Welcome to our yeshiva. We have a lot of enjoyment. We see Erez comes with his grandfather. It's a special inyan of Chuta Mishulash Lo B'Mehera Yinatek. You know what that means, Erez? It says in Kohelet that if there's a cord that's bound by three, it cannot be severed quickly. So when you study with your grandfather, but it spans three. So therefore, it means that the Torah should be part of your family for generations to come. So this is the pasuk. You have the place errors? Okay. Parachav Gimel pasuk tet. We read the pasuk and the Rashi. Okay. Well, let me just go over the pasuk again. It says about the Egyptians that the children that they have cannot marry in until the third generation. Means to say, if Egyptian converts, then he can't marry a Jew yet, a person who's born Jew. He can only marry a person who's born Jew, only his grandchildren. And that's assuming that his child doesn't marry a first generation Egyptian convert. So Rashi, Banim Asher Yivaldu Ahem Dor Shlishi. Okay, as you read, go slowly, so we have to analyze this Rashi carefully. Tet. But that Rashi might be listed with Pasuk Chet. Okay, go on. Yeah, Banim Asher. This is a very, very important Rashi. Ushar Ha'umot. Yeah, all the other nations don't have to wait 3 generations. Like if you're from, let's see, Emory, Kanani, Prizi, you can convert and immediately marry in. Just the Egyptians and the Edomites. Okay, go on. Shamachtila Adam is teaching us a very important lesson. Somebody who is machti, you know what the word chat means? Chat means sin. So somebody who causes somebody to sin, shamachtil adam, somebody who causes somebody to sin, go on. Exactly. Somebody who causes somebody to sin is worse, it is more difficult to him than somebody who kills him. It's not literally, because literally, obviously, God forbid somebody kills somebody, that's hard to imagine anything worse. But on a spiritual level, when you cause this person to become a sinner, that's actually worse. Like, you could think about it. Let's say you're somebody who gets somebody else to become addicted to drugs, alcohol. You ruin their life. You ruin their life. Okay, let's see what Rashi says. So somebody who kills him, you're just killing him in this world. Okay, he's done. But go on. Somebody who causes him to sin. Go on. So if you cause them to sin, you're causing them to lose this world and also the world to come. They've wasted their life. Okay, go on. So how does this relate to the Egyptians? Fikach Edom shekidman b'cherev lo nitav. So therefore, Edom, what did they do? They went out to greet the Jewish people with a sword, but they're not completely hated. Mitzrayim shetivum. What did Egypt do? They drowned them. They're not completely hated. Why? Because they're allowed to marry in the third generation. Whereas, you see, yesterday we discussed Ammonites and Moabites. What's the law with them? They're never allowed to marry in. Why? Because they caused the Jewish people to sin with the Midianites. So that's the distinction. The Mitzrim and the Edomites, all they did was kill the Jews or try to kill the Jews. Whereas the Ammonites and the Moabites, they caused them to sin and go astray. And so therefore, they're never allowed to marry in. Really, I don't know exactly what the Ammonites, the Moabites caused them to go astray by convincing the Midianite women. But I'm not sure what the Ammonites did. But anyway, that's the Rashi. Okay. Next pasuk. Okay. You know what? This one, this parasha has the most mitzvahs of any mitzvah in the Torah. So we want to get to all the mitzvahs. So let's skip a little bit because it's already Thursday night, so we're not going to be able to go through everyone. So I want to make sure. I mean, the pasuk we're going to skip is that you have to have a pure camp. But let's go a little bit now to pasuk Tetzei. So pasuk Tetzei, verse 16. Lo tazkir eved el adonav. You're not allowed to return a slave to his master. Asher yinatzel elecha mi'im adonav, who's running away for you or who's rescued for you from his master. What does that mean? What does that mean, Tani? You're not allowed to return a slave to his master. So first of all, we want to say that there are two types of slaves. There is an Eved Ivri and an Eved Kanani, a Hebrew slave and a Canaanite slave. It's clearly not referring to a Hebrew slave. We're talking about a Canaanite who's living amongst you. What type of slave are we talking about? What does it mean you're not allowed to return him? So let's look what Rashi says. Erez, please. Kitargumo. So what does Targumo mean? Kitargumo means like the Targum says. So we have to look at the Unkos. Targum is reference to Unkos, which means Timsar Eved Amamin Liyad Riboneh. So that's what the Unkos says. Do not return a slave of the nations. So let's say there's a Canaanite slave who ran to you. You're not allowed to return him to his master. If a slave runs away to you, you're not allowed to return him to his master. This is what basically one of the main catalysts for the Civil War is, because even when the slaves ran to the north, they changed the law that they could still be caught and arrested and sent back. So the Torah says you're not allowed to do that. Go on. So the first approach is that it refers to if there's a Canaanite slave who was a slave for a Canaanite master and he runs to you, you're not allowed to return him. Because when he's with you, he has certain privileges of being quasi-Jewish. So that's the first approach. But Rashi gives a second approach. I feel Eved Kanani Shel Yisrael. Let's say there's a Canaanite slave of a Jew. Shebarach michutz la'aretz la'eretz Yisrael. If the Canaanite slave of a Jew, let's say you're living in Babylon, and you have a Canaanite slave, and your slave runs to Israel. So that, based upon the Gemara and Gittin, that slave automatically goes free. Automatically goes free. So the whole concept of slavery in the Torah is a very obviously a very difficult concept because how could the Torah allow slavery? We know that it's hard to imagine anything crueler being done to a human being than to enslave them. Our whole faith, the catalyst for it is being redeemed from slavery. And the Canaanite slave is a slave. But you see from this halacha that the Torah recognizes his humanity and recognizes that if he's going to be on a spiritual path of ascent, we're not allowed to enslave him. Anyway, those are two explanations with Rashi. And then we go to the next pasuk. Imcha yeshev b'kirbecha. He should live with you. You have to live with him in your gates. You're not allowed to. The prohibition of onah means taunting. You know how to taunt him. I'm going to tell you a story about a slave. I'm going to tell you a story that happened in Bnei Brak in 1950. This refers to a Canaanite slave. But a Hebrew slave is a slave, Tani, who's Jewish, but it's not really a slave. It means that he works for you. He works for you, basically, and with a contract. So the halacha is that Kona Eved, Kona Rabbo, it says the Gemara in Kedushin. If you acquire a slave, you acquire a master. Mean to say that if you only have one pillow, you have to give it to the slave. He has to eat what you eat, to the Jewish servant. He has to eat what you eat. He has to sleep the same type of sheets, same type of bedding. You have to pay for his children's education. Okay. Let's say he has only one pillow. Let's say you only have one pillow. Who gets the pillow? The master or the servant? The servant. Now, so the servant. If there's only one pillow, the servant gets it. So it happened in 1950 that there was a boat of orphans from the Holocaust that arrived in Bnei Brak. And they were coming off the boat, and they had nothing. Obviously, so Israel was a very poor country back then, obviously. They had nothing. Everybody had nothing then. It wasn't like today. You go to Bnei Brak. I was just there. It's just, very wealthy area, obviously. So anyway, very expensive real estate. Okay, fine, but not then. So they had no pillows to sleep on. And they were there over Shabbos. So the Panovich Rav, when I was there, somebody said to me, you want to go see where the Panovich Rav is buried? Go, but I was in a rush, so I didn't go. But the Panovich Rav got up to give a drasha in shul that Shabbos. Panovich Rav said, the Gemara says, in a circumstance where you have a servant, you have to give your pillow to the servant because he's your brother. So he says, I don't understand. This contradicts a different halacha. What's the halacha? If you're in the desert and there's only one cup of water for you and your friend, so you're supposed to drink the water and you don't give it to your friend. Why? Because it says, hello, Leah, hello, Jeff. It says that your wife comes before the wife of your friend. So if that's the case, how come we have to give the pillow to the servant? You should come before your friend, right? You understand the question, Tani? You chop it, Eris? This is like, unfortunately, Leah said she came into Damas because she had a bad night because her brother had a bad night. This story is exactly, I didn't know you were coming in, but this is exactly relevant to your brother Shaver Fuah Shalema, Chaim Moshe ben Rachel. I'll learn in his merit. Says the Panovich Rav, you know why you have to give your pillow to the servant? You're not doing it for the servant. If you, exactly, as Erez Saba says, you wouldn't be able to sleep if the person who's in your house doesn't have a pillow. How can you sleep? Yeah, it's a good question. We could have asked the Panovich Rav that because there you would die from lack of, you would die from dehydration. But here we're saying You're giving him the pillow so you can sleep at night. Because how can you sleep if your friend is lying in your home without a pillow? Like if you had a guest come over and you had no pillow for them, you give him your pillow, obviously. So that's what the Panovitcher Rav says. And that night, it said everybody from Bnei Brak brought their pillows. What? For the children, for the orphans. Yeah, how could they sleep knowing that the orphans off of the boat who survived the Shoah had no pillow? And well, they sleeping with their pillow. Not possible. Okay. Let's go to the prohibition of interest. Pasuk Chaf. Well, we're doing Parachav Gimel, Leah and Jeff, Pasuk Chaf. Well, Tashich, Achicha, Neshach, Kasef, Neshach, Ochel. You're not allowed to charge your brother interest. Neshach, Kasef, the word Neshach, Gemara tells us comes from to bite. To bite. Hello, Eitan. Baruch Hashem. Grab a chumash. Come on in, Eyal. Baruch Hashem. I love it when you're here. So the word neshach means to bite. So you're not allowed to charge to your friend, but really the way we interpret it is it's called ribis. Do you know what ribis is? Interest. Do you know what interest is? What's interest, Tanya? Exactly. Let's say I borrow. I say, can I borrow $100? You say, sure, but you have to pay back 5% on that loan every day. Then there's something called compound interest, where it's compounded. Anyway, so that's the idea. You're not allowed to charge interest to your friend, neshach kasef, or neshach ochal, interest of money, interest of food. Neshach kol davar asher yishach. You're not allowed to charge interest on anything. We'll see what that means, what Rashi says. But let me just read the next pasuk so we have the context. L'nachri tashich. To the nachri, you shall charge interest. The Gemara discusses in the parak Ezu Neshach whether there's three approaches in the Gemara. Remember this, Jeff? We did it about interest with your friend. Is it what interest with a non-Jew? Is it a mitzvah to charge him an interest? Is it a permission or is it not allowed? The Gemara has three possibilities. They have to explain that pasuk. But it says, "Remind you that God should bless you with all the work of your hands." This is the prohibition of interest, which is ironic because the only profession in Western Europe that Jews were able to do was money lending, banking, the Jewish profession. So let's see what Rashi says. Pasuk Chaf. Erez, please read the pasuk. We'll read the Rashi. Lo tashich. So Rashi doesn't go into all the laws of Ezu Neshach, but he's which is from Metzia Ayin Hay, but he starts us off with something. So this is a prohibition. Who is the prohibition on about charging interest? Rashi says this pasuk of Lo Tashich is telling us the loved. You know what the loved is? The loved is the borrower. The borrower is not allowed to pay the interest. There's a prohibition ayal against the lender charging interest, and there's a prohibition against the borrower paying interest. Not allowed to pay interest. How do they do it in Israel? How do they do it with the Jewish banks in Israel? They figured it out. Let me say this. I studied the laws of interest, ribis, with one of the, probably the expert in the world on ribis. It was Dr. Chaim Soloveitchik. So I studied with him. He wrote a book on it, pawnbroking and money lending in the Middle Ages. He's a tremendous genius, the son of Rabbi Joseph Soloveitchik. He said, in the time of the Torah, money was for survival. Like basically, you needed to have money for food, for supper, so you need to borrow. Basically, it's like asking to buy a loaf of bread. But already in the time of the Gemara, and for sure in the Middle Ages, money became a commodity. So what does that mean? It's a commodity. What does that mean, Tani? It means that that there's nothing immoral now about going to the bank and getting interest from them, and charging them interest. Because if you go to the bank and you give them $1 million, how have I, right? And then you say, okay, you know what? I'm not going to, if you say to the bank, I want to borrow $1 million, and the bank's going to be like, okay, here it is. What are you going to do with that $1 million? You're going to invest it. You can put it in a treasury bill, which is, I don't know, 4%, 3%, 5%. You're going to be making money for it. Money is something that's used to make money. It's going up in value. So the whole concept of the immorality of interest is not as strong anymore. It's not sustenance loans, but we still have the prohibition of the Torah. So already in the Middle Ages, the rabbis came up with a concept called heter iska, and that's the way that if you want to borrow money from Jews, a lot of Hasidic Jews are in the money lending business. They use something called a heter iska, which is basically a legal way of, like we sell chametz. This is a legal way of figuring out how you can lend money in accordance with Jewish law and borrow money in accordance with Jewish law. And I have a couple of had to get involved in that a couple of times in my rabbinate. Okay, so anyway, back to you, Eris. Yeah. But they were the only thing they could do. They were bankers because they weren't allowed to be, let's say, tailors or carpenters. They weren't allowed in those professions. It was a whole guild.
Something they could grant people from place to place.
Yeah, and banking was natural for the Jews because they had a network in different countries. Like the Italians or the French were in France. They didn't necessarily keep up with their cousins in Poland, but the Jews had this network because they were not tied down to any specific land. Anyway, go on with the Rashi. So it's a prohibition to the borrower that he can't lend money to the lender, that he can't pay the lender. V'achar kach, says Rashi, and afterwards, asara l'malveh. So there's this pasuk first warns the borrower that you're not allowed to pay, and then the lender that you're not allowed to charge. So anyway, this is the prohibition of interest. If you're interested, God willing, in the Daf Yomi, we'll get back to that in around 5 years. We'll get back to Bava Metzia, maybe 6 years, and we'll study Parak Ezu Nashach, one of the great classic chapters in all of the Shas. We loved it. Jeff and I studied it together. It was and Mordechai and Aviva. It was amazing, and God willing, we'll get back to it soon. But for now, we'd have a mincha, a big shkoyach to everybody. We'll all have in mind. Chaim Moshe ben Rachel should have a refuah shleimah. Yasher koach.